This is Matador News, and these are today's headlines. CSUN students are taking precautions to reduce the risk of the coronavirus on campus. Voters in Michigan and 5 other states head to the polls. And Coachella might have to reschedule its music festival this year.
Hello and welcome to Matador News. I'm Bryce Oaks.
And I'm Desiree Rosales. 2 Cal State universities have closed down due to the coronavirus. Matador News reporter Christian Pineda is in the newsroom with the latest on what CSUN students think about the situation.
Thanks, Desiree. It's business as usual here at CSUN, at least for most, but for some, the coronavirus is bringing more stress than midterms. Campus officials say they're monitoring the situation and are reassuring students that there are no positive cases of the coronavirus on campus or in the student body. CSUN student Raimundo Martinez says he thinks the campus could be doing more to help students feel more safe.
They could find ways to educate people more on safety measures to take, which I'm glad they've started doing as well. You know, I've started seeing the signs on how to prevent it and stuff. But I also feel that if this outbreak does get to a certain point where, you know, it gets closer and there's a higher risk, I think campus should be a little more quicker to respond in terms of making certain decisions that will impact students.
13 CSUN students have self-quarantined after attending an event in Washington, D.C., where they may have come into contact with people who tested positive for the virus. Let's go back to Bryce in the studio for more news on the coronavirus.
Thanks, Christian. As the virus spreads through the U.S., federal health officials are trying to reassure the public. Secretary of Health Alex Azar says the current situation was expected from the beginning.
It was never going to be possible to hermetically seal us off from this outbreak, and we have said that from the very first communications that we have had to the American people about this. The United States was always going to see a substantial number of cases, just like our wealthy peer countries.
The CDC's director says the spread through the country has been slowed due to the investments into public health. The effect on the economy has caused some debate in the Senate as President Trump considers a payroll tax cut. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says the virus itself is more important.
The administration seems to believe that the answer to any problem is another tax cut. And no matter what they say about it, when they put it together, it always seems to benefit the wealthy and the big and powerful corporations.
The U.S. now has 754 cases of COVID-19, with 28 deaths so far.
Here in California, 2 people have died from the coronavirus so far. Public health officials say one of the deceased was exposed to the virus during a mid-February trip on a Princess cruise ship traveling from San Francisco to Mexico. The other patient had no history of international travel or, apparently, contact with a person known to be infected. At least 21 aboard the Grand Princess cruise ship have been infected by the virus. The ship arrived in the port yesterday. Passengers were being allowed to begin disembarking from the ship to be sent to quarantine centers at the military bases in California, Texas, and Georgia. A Florida couple who was aboard the Princess cruise ship has also filed a lawsuit against the ship's operator, Princess Cruise Lines, alleging that the company exposed them to the diseases.
The virus has infected more than 113,000 people globally and caused 4,000 deaths. Over 103 countries are reporting cases of the coronavirus. The virus epicenter, China, reported nearly 90,000 cases and over 3,000 deaths. South Korea reported the 7,500 cases and 53 deaths. Japan reported 705 cases and 15 deaths. In Iran, the virus killed 54 people yesterday, raising the country's death toll to 290. Canada, Morocco, and Lebanon have confirmed their first coronavirus deaths. Italy's coronavirus death toll jumped from 366 to 463 yesterday. The Vatican, visited by over 5 million people every year, has closed St. Peter's Square and Vasquillas to tour groups as part of the travel restrictions across the country. All 60 million Italian residents are under restrictions that include travel checks, school closures, and bans on public events.
Millions of women strike in protest against gender-based violence in Mexico. Women across the country stayed at home yesterday from school and work. A few women who were seen working on public transportation, in shopping areas, or at cafes wore purple clothing or a purple ribbon to represent solidarity with the action. An estimated 10 women are killed each day in Mexico, and more than 700 cases of femicide are under investigation.
6 more states are up for grabs in the Democratic primary. Michigan is the biggest state with this time with 125 delegates. Both Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders say that they are the ones capable of defeating Donald Trump.
Anybody really think that that is going to be the campaign of excitement and energy that's going to grow the base that we need to defeat Trump? I don't think so. I say that honestly as a friend of Joe's.
One of the nominees is going to beat Donald Trump, keep the House of Representatives, win back the United States Senate, join us.
Biden is more than 100 delegates ahead. Sanders won Michigan narrowly in 2016, but Biden is currently leading in polls. Idaho, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, and Washington State are also voting today.
Now let's take it over to Mareo Lawson, who has the latest on business news.
Thank you, Desiree. Dick's Sporting Goods will stop selling guns at 440 additional stores this year. The move speeds up the company's methodical elimination of all firearms from its stores. This decision was first made after the Parkland, Florida shooting in February 2018. After the shooting, Dick's pulled firearms and other weapons from 10 stores as a test. Overall, the sales increased in those 10 stores. The company then pulled guns and ammunition from 125 additional stores in March 2019. Now, Dick's plans to quadruple that number. The company reported about $2.5 billion in sales in the fourth quarter. That's up almost 5%. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she blames President Trump's mishandling of the coronavirus outbreak for billions of dollars in losses on Wall Street. She says the financial markets disruption is due to a lack of confidence, but Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin says the economy remains strong.
Today was an unprecedented move in the oil market. So, we saw a overnight reaction of over down 20%. And that's obviously what had a major component today on the stock market.
Meanwhile, the financial markets continued to fluctuate as trading began this morning. At last check, the Dow is up 750 after a massive drop of 2,000 points yesterday, the worst day since 2008. Also, the S&P 500 is up 90 points after dropping more than 7% yesterday. Now let's go to Matthew Yahata with the latest on health news.
Thanks, Mareo. Health officials say symptoms of the coronavirus usually takes 5 days to appear, but in rare cases, they can take as long as 12 days. This means anyone around you can have the virus and not know it. The virus may disguise itself as a simple cold with symptoms of fever, cough, or shortness of breath. Health officials say if you think you've been exposed to the virus, especially if you recently traveled outside the country, you should self-quarantine for at least 14 days. But some cases are starting to appear among people who haven't traveled, and since testing is so far limited, if symptoms appear, especially among older people and people comprised with comprised immune systems, see a doctor. The American Heart Association is now prompting people to engage in hands-only CPR instead of using mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. The AHA vice president says the most important part of the CPR is to immediately start the chest compression because it helps circulate the blood around the body. A hands-only approach only requires people to put the heel of one hand on a breastbone of the person and putting the other hand on top of the first hand. The person doing CPR should be pushing down hard and fast to the beat of Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. The vice president says it only takes 90 seconds to learn and is what saves most lives. Now let's take it over back to Mareo for the latest on entertainment news.
Thanks, Matt. The coronavirus is not stopping people from enjoying their traditions. The Holi Festival is celebrated by those practicing Hinduism, has participants of all ages coming together on the streets of India. Part of the celebration consists of a bonfire meant to burn away all the bad and evil. This year, residents in India burned statues representing the coronavirus. Still, sales of the holy merchandise like bright powders, water balloons, and squirt guns are down nearly 75%. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has decided to take extra precautions. He announced on Twitter that he had decided not to participate in any Holi celebrations. Major events continue to be postponed in an effort to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Coachella Valley Music and Arts Festival may be the latest casualty. Coachella organizers Golden Voice are reportedly talking to artists to move the event to another date. The two-weekend event is set to start April 10th and proceed into the following weekend. Golden Voice is working on moving the festival to October 9th and 16th. The concern for this event came shortly after the Riverside County Public Health Department declared a public health emergency after its first confirmed local case of the coronavirus. That's all for entertainment. Let's go back to Matthew with the latest on news on sports.
March Madness starts next week. The full bracket of 68 teams will be announced this Sunday, but with the coronavirus outbreak, the NCAA is preparing for the worst. Already, the sports organization created a coronavirus advisory panel. This group of experts is working with host schools to monitor and evaluate the virus threat daily. Colleges are canceling games in cities where the coronavirus has affected the most. Chicago State University and University of Missouri-Kansas City have canceled their road trips to Seattle, Washington, the same state where the first and second round of March Madness is taking place. The National College Players Association has asked the NCAA to consider having the tournament with no crowds. If the NCAA decides to do so, they will be losing out on a huge chunk of revenue. The final decision on what happens to the games is up to the health officials. 27 people are charged with taking part in a scheme to give racehorses performance-enhancing drugs. They are accused of misleading the government agency that regulates care of the horses by disguising the drugs with misleading labels. One of the drugs increases the horse's endurance and speed recovery. U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, Jeffrey Berman, says the people involved had no sportsmanship or intent for animal care.
This is the most far-reaching prosecution of racehorse doping in the history of the Department of Justice. The defendants who we charge today engaged in this conduct not for the love of the sport and certainly not out of care for the horses, but for money.
New York FBI agents say the horses have experienced cardiac issues, leg fractures, and even death. Prosecutors have not released the number of horses that died due to the scheme, or the total amount of money the people involved pocketed. That's all for sports. Let's check in with Desiree for the weather.
Thanks, Matthew. In Southern California weather, the current temperature in Northridge is 57 degrees. The temperature is expected to drop 5 degrees tonight. The high for today will be 63 with cloudy skies. Do expect rain all day and some thunder during the afternoon and evening. Temperatures are expected to stay cloudy, cool, and rainy until the end of the week. Last night, before the rain started, was the beginning of the last full moon of winter, also known as the warm moon. The warm moon happens around the same time as daylight saving time. The moon was named by the Native Americans as they associated full moons with the transition of seasons. March is associated with earthworms because it's when the ground begins to soften, making it easier for worms to squirm to the surface.
A western lowland gorilla gave birth to a healthy boy last week at Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle. The baby gorilla is the first offspring between the 12-year-old mother, Azuma, and the 20-year-old father, Kwame. The first time mom and baby remain off view in the sleeping dens where they can bond in a hushed, comfortable environment. The baby hasn't been named yet. The infant is the 14th gorilla born at Woodland Park Zoo. The zoo is happy to report that both the baby and the mom are doing very well. Thanks for watching Matador News. I'm Bryce Oakes.
I'm Matthew Yahata.
I'm Desiree Leon Rosales.
And I'm Mareo Ahmir Lawson.